Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto.
In a world on the brink of disruption, two men will bring you clarity by interviewing some of the most intelligent and influential names in the blockchain world. Welcome to Show Me the Crypto with your hosts, Wade Patterson and Ulf Lonergan.
Well, hi there and welcome to Show Me the Crypto. My name's Wade Patterson.
And I'm Ulf Lonergan.
We're a couple of friends from Canada who love learning about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we're happy you're along for the ride. Whether you're a crypto virgin or you know your way around the block, we hope our interviews with some of the most intelligent and influential people in the blockchain space help bring you value. And on this episode, we're joined by David Hoffman, co-owner of Bankless. David's plans to pursue a graduate degree were put on hold when he discovered blockchain technology, and his intrinsic desire to learn more about the space has turned into a career of promoting the best of what blockchain has to offer. Through these efforts, David and his Bankless co-host, Ryan Sean Adams, have interviewed some of the biggest names in crypto, including Vitalik Buterin, the Winklevoss twins, and Erik Voorhees. Most of David's spare time is spent either writing or reading about Ethereum, and he makes sure there is always an ETH USD chart on a screen within viewing distance. David, welcome to Show Me the Crypto.
Hey, thanks for having me here, guys. That was a really generous intro. Thanks for the kind words.
Hey, we are stoked to have you on. And so I touched on this briefly in the bio, but you're in university, you're studying psychology. At what point on the timeline did you discover blockchain technology, and what was your initial impression?
Yeah, I discovered crypto, mainly Ethereum. Ethereum is the thing that captured my attention in 2017 during the price run-ups, as one does. This is how this industry works. Prices go up and people's attention goes to the industry. Some people stay behind after the prices collapsed. I stayed behind. And this was roughly 2 years after I graduated from undergraduate university. And then I I was on my way to apply to graduate school for physical therapy, really into the world of like movement, health sciences. But at some point in time, I was trying to juggle the balance between applying for graduate school and also learning about this fascinating thing called like Ethereum and crypto and Bitcoin and all the attention going on there. And at some point, instead of just like studying for the GRE and researching schools and doing what I needed to do to get into grad school, I found myself instead like watching Vitalik YouTube videos or reading white papers or doing other things that were not university related. And at some point that just came to an inflection point where I had to be honest with myself, like, what is my attention? Where is my attention really going here? Like, what do I really care about? And I realized that there's no way that I could like sit and be happy inside of grad school while I'm watching this industry grow. And I just had at some point made the commitment to bail from grad school and just go all into crypto.
Why is blockchain technology worth paying attention to, in your opinion?
Yeah, so it's one of the reasons why I think this industry is so hard to understand is that we are never taught in schools about money. And so getting the conversation about like why blockchain tech is cool actually has to start with a conversation about what money is, because there was always that camp, not always, but like there was that like a blockchain, not Bitcoin camp, which definitely I would say is not a rich area of study. I would say that the blockchain, and Bitcoiners would resonate with this. The blockchain is meant to host scarce assets, right? And Bitcoin being the first, you could call that the first ever digital scarce money. But the conversation doesn't start with blockchain. The conversation starts with money and value and like what value is. To me, Bitcoin and Ethereum are property rights management systems, and Bitcoin particularly is a property rights management system for Bitcoins. And it turns out that property rights management system is so incredibly valuable that Bitcoin turns into be quote unquote money. And so that's where I got into the space as when I first put my foot into the door. I was understanding that this is actually like a monetary revolution more than it is a technological revolution. Now I'm actually forgetting the original question.
Just why in general it's so important for people to pay attention to blockchain. Yeah.
So it's also important to know that like fiat money, the money that we currently have, is not that old. Like the dollar in its current form is only 30 years old. When we went off the gold standard in the 70s, in 1971, I think. The actual brand of the dollar is older than that. It goes back, to 100 plus years. But the lack of education around what money is in our studies kind of forgets to inform us that like monies change. Like monies as a form change from one to the next. And so to think that, we are just going to have like this current form of money from now until the end of time, like even our parents didn't have the same kind of money from when they were born pre-70s to what the money is now. Right. So it's really, and especially as money, it's something that you touch almost every single day. It's half of every transaction. It's really important to understand that, this industry is about offering new forms of money to come into, and money is one of the most important things in this entire universe.
100%.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you follow Ray Dalio at all?
Totally. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ray Dalio's put together a series. I think it's actually a part of his upcoming book, but he talks about the changing order of money through time. And it's super interesting for those who aren't familiar, because like we've been in a time where everyone who's alive right now is pretty much used to one form of currency. As you mentioned, it's changed slightly from a technological level, and we've been working through a transition period right now. But over time, it's completely changed who's been in control of money, time and time again. And I think that that's something people don't really recognize or ever think about until they get into something like cryptocurrency, that then kind of opens their eyes to that world and how that has happened in our past.
Yeah, totally. My mom would always struggle trying to explain what I would do to her friends. And so at some point in time, I just promised that I will like sit people down and like give a presentation to all people all at once. And that turned into actually an event at a brewery. So I hosted like a 2-hour event where I could actually just explain the industry. So it was actually a pretty like boomer rich attended event. There's some of my friends, of course, but like it was like 20 to 30 and I made some advertisements. So it's like a come and learn about this industry. And I talked for about an hour, and the first 45 minutes, I didn't talk at all about crypto. And what I talked about was the progress of money throughout time, trying to inject the idea into people's heads that money's change. And especially boomers who, were born in the 40s, like raised in the 60s and 70s, they haven't really known anything other than the brand of the dollar. So if in order to get them to like understand and appreciate Bitcoin, which is kind of like a big ask, getting them to like wrap their heads around a new form of value that's not the dollar, you can't just start talking about how cool Bitcoin is. You actually have to break down their previous mental models of what money is, just because it's weird to consider money as not something that the state offers you. It's weird to think of like money that is something that, you find in the ground like gold, or you find in the ground of the internet like Bitcoin. It first takes breaking down before you can build up the value behind this industry.
I want to dive deeper there into Ethereum specifically, because a lot of our audience is that group that is maybe learning about crypto for the first time, brand new to the space. So what is it about Ethereum that gets you so excited about it?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, these systems are property management systems. That's what a blockchain does. A blockchain is interesting because it is a ledger, a distributed ledger that we can all trust. Bitcoin as the first instantiation of this is a very good ledger for transferring Bitcoins. The cool thing about Ethereum is that Ethereum is agnostic. It is a agnostic property rights management system. And so it can be the property rights management system for any asset that you want to spin up. And that's kind of one of the powers of Ethereum, is that it offers what I like to call abundant scarcity. There is now plenty of ways to generate scarcity on Ethereum. This is what the ERC20 token is on Ethereum. The ERC20 token, that's the token standard. Almost all tokens on Ethereum are ERC20 tokens, DAI, MKR, Aave, Wi-Fi. All of these are ERC20 tokens. And anyone can spin one up. So like when Ryan and I on the Bankless program, we sold 50 t-shirts, but only if they were redeemable for these tokens. So you'd actually have to buy the token and then burn one. And the cool thing is there's like this scarce asset that goes along with the t-shirt. And how would we do this in the legacy world? How would we make verifiable, provable scarcity in the legacy system without an Ethereum blockchain? My previous company that I worked at, Realty, it used ERC20 tokens to represent the deed to a property. So that's one way to use a token. Then there's plenty of native assets on Ethereum, like all the ones I just mentioned, all the other tokens. And it can do anything. It's a generalizable internet-based online property management system, which offers infrastructure for the whole entire globe to leverage all at once, have a communal source of truth, a canonical source of truth of where all the assets are owned by whom, and whom, of course, is people's Ethereum addresses. That's the power I see being unlocked with Ethereum, and that's what really gets me excited about it.
You mentioned Realty, and that this was something, your previous company. Can you tell us a little bit about your history and how you got involved in that?
Yeah, while I was working my way through the 2018-19 bear market, I was in the world of tokenized securities. I worked for a consulting company called Bunker Capital that consulted with people that wanted to issue a tokenized security. One of those clients was Realty, and also one of the owners of Bunker Capital also was spinning up Realty. So like he had his like one foot in both camps. And it became pretty clear that all the other clients didn't really have the cool product that Realty had. And Realty had something that was very much in demand, like international access to US real estate investments, especially in Detroit, which is a very hot place for international real estate investments. And what you can do with Ethereum is you can simply take a deed to a property and put it into a LLC, and then tie that LLC to a token on Ethereum, or in Realty's case, 1,000 tokens, depending on the property, to keep the price down, right? And so we would want the tokens to be roughly valued at $50, and so we would mint X number of tokens to match that price, depending on the value of the property. And then you can sign up with Realty, go through the KYC process, and then you can purchase these tokens that gives you claims to the property in Detroit. So it's an online way to access US real estate very, very easily. And the cool thing about Realty is that they take the rent money and send it to the token holders every single month, right? So they collect the money from the tenant, turn it into USDC coin or a stable coin on Ethereum, and then it gets sent to the token holders. And that's just something that that's one of the many things that you can do with Ethereum. So we use two different types of tokens there, both ERC20 tokens. One is the claim on the property, and the other is the currency, the money that we send to the property owners for the revenue from the rental income. I thought that was a pretty cool model.
Yeah, no kidding. Beyond tokenized kind of fractional ownership in real estate, do you see the real estate industry, being with Realty and whatnot, do you see it being disrupted further based on blockchain technology?
You know, I kind of consider everything is going to get disrupted by Ethereum at some point in time. Some industries sooner than others. I think the off-chain assets and off-chain, like there are some, to define that, there are some assets on Ethereum that are solely on-chain. And these would be like DeFi tokens that control over DeFi protocols that exist on Ethereum. You know, everything is on Ethereum. Off-chain assets like a property or like the title to a car or some claim on some real world asset is a much harder problem to solve because that asset is in meat space, right? That's in human land. There is a court system that actually determines the final settlement. Whereas on Ethereum is just like a ledger to account for the updates, but the actual settlement of the house or the real world property actually is determined by a court of law. And so you're actually trying to transcend two systems of property ownership. You're trying to transcend both the legal legacy system of property ownership and also property ownership on Ethereum. That's a big challenge. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons why the off-chain asset tokenization industry is kind of going to be slower to move than the native DeFi infrastructure. Just it's easier to move if everything's on Ethereum. However, real estate has a very compelling argument for why it needs to be on a public blockchain like Ethereum, because real estate is very low liquidity and very high value. And what Ethereum offers and what public blockchains offers are extreme amounts of liquidity, but they suffer from value because their only real kind of value that you can get are these like native DeFi token protocols. There's no other way to get value onto Ethereum. So like real estate has what Ethereum wants, which is value, just market cap, just the value of the property. And Ethereum has what real estate wants, which is like easily transferable ownership and liquid access to real estate. So the marriage between those two things, I think, is going to be really powerful. Of all the off-chain assets to come to Ethereum, I do believe real estate is going to be first in the category. But again, the off-chain asset conversation is difficult just because, again, you're transcending two universes, right? So that's what Realty is trying to tackle.
Switching gears a little bit here, David, I'm super impressed with what you and your co-host have accomplished with Bankless, and in a relatively short time as well, considering that you just learned about the space in 2017. So there was an interview I saw that you did with Anthony Sassano, and you asked him, why does the world need the Daily Gwei? So I'm going to ask you, why does the world need Bankless?
That's a good question. Yeah, it seems like it's been a relatively short time, but Ryan started the newsletter before I came onto Bankless, and so that newsletter had been churning. But also, I can't remember when he started that. Probably sometime in 2019. It's also worth noting that Ethereum is only 6 years old, and so I've been in crypto for a little bit over 3 years, which is over half of Ethereum's lifespan. Not as long as Bitcoin. Bitcoin's been around for much longer, but as far as Ethereum goes, and almost all of Ethereum's history has happened in the last 2 years. So for Ethereum goes, that's how young this industry is. Like, you can spend 2 to 3 years in it, and you're actually a veteran. It's very short lifespan. Why does the world need Bankless? So when I was younger, I was very, very politically motivated, maybe pretty also naive, kind of a revolutionary. I would wear like CCCP shirts to middle school, kind of not really knowing what I was doing. But I enjoyed the ruse, right? But still like politically motivated. But at some point, politics, I kind of got disillusioned with politics, like actually like trying to invoke change at like the government layer. And I got into cryptocurrency, and after a while, I realized that cryptocurrency is actually an extremely political revolution. These are social revolutions that determine how people manage value, and that's typically something in the realm of politics. And the Bankless revolution, to me, is a very anti-authoritarian revolution. So you have that political compass meme where you have the left and the right, and then you have authoritarian and libertarian. I never really considered myself a libertarian, but I definitely consider myself an anti-authoritarian. And what we saw throughout the revolution of money from gold at the very beginning, not the very beginning, but pretty far into history to where we are now, is we see like this money change shape and form, but then it always tends to be captured by some entity that leverage the capture of money systems for their own benefit, right? So if you are the king and you get to have the right to mint coin, that's an extremely powerful tool. And money over time always tends to converge. It's very powerful to be able to control money. Right now, there's always only one entity that really controls money, right? Like Argentina has a central bank, Venezuela has a central bank, but they don't control money, right? That's not the money of the world. The money of the world is the US dollar. And the US dollar, the Federal Reserve, they have the money printer. That's a really powerful tool. And the exercising of that tool is, I think, an inherently authoritarian exercise. Money, I think, is a public good. It's something by the people, for the people. It's a bottom-up thing. And this bottom-up thing is very powerful, and it tends to get captured by the people that have a monopoly on violence. And that's what the nation state is. The nation state is something that has a monopoly on violence. When we watch our congressmen and our senators make decisions, what they are really saying is we are going to make these the law, and if people violate the law, we can use force to put them in jail. That's what the nation state does. If they have the tool of the money printer behind them, that force is even more powerful. And so it can be argued that like the leveraging of the money printer, the ability to print money, is an extension of the power of a armed military. That's why the U.S. military is so strong. Why? So and I don't think like this cryptocurrency revolution is going to upend that, but it does put power back into the hands of the individual. The private key that only you have and only you know about, that is easily hideable as a piece of paper or memorizable into your brain, in the combination with public money like Bitcoin or Ether, not the dollar, not stable coins. Those aren't public money. Those are US dollar top-down monies. Bitcoin and Ether are bottom up money by the people for the people. And it's using property rights management systems that doesn't rely on the nation state and gives you more power. If you have Ether in your wallet or you have Bitcoin in your wallet, no one can take it away from you. No one can print more, because the ability to print more is a form of seizing, right? So for example, if there's $10 out in the world and you have one of them, but somebody has the money printer and then they print 10 more dollars, the total supply of dollars just went from 10 to 20 and you still have $1. So you actually got diluted by 50%. It's a backdoor seizing of the money. And this is why Bitcoin and Ethereum are so powerful, is that they give power back to the individual. And I think that is something that is very much lacking in this world. There's tons of centralized power in nation state governments. There's tons of centralized power in banks, in wealthy banks. And if we can get some of these powerful institutions disintermediated by smart contracts on Ethereum and by public monies, by Bitcoin and Ether, that's very empowering for the individual. And I think the universe is just better off if more individuals are empowered, at least in relationship to the power dynamics between, the central nation state and the individual.
Ulf, did you realize that our audience has either been watching or listening to this episode for more than 20 minutes?
20 minutes? No way. They should probably subscribe.
Yeah, they should subscribe and like and comment and turn on that notification bell. All right, back to the episode. And just in terms of your relationship and kind of building this partnership with Ryan, you mentioned he had started the newsletter. Did you guys know each other beforehand, or how did that partnership come about?
Yeah, so I've actually never met the man.
I love it.
I've only actually interacted with him through Zoom or Discord, but it also sometimes people think that's weird, but
welcome to 2021.
Exactly, right? Especially during COVID quarantine, I've seen Ryan 100 times more than most of my friends, right? And so at that point, the lines kind of blur between does it actually really matter if I haven't met this individual? We got connected kind of on Twitter. Yeah, definitely on Twitter. And at some point, his tweets and my tweets were just resonating with each other. And at some point, we just got into a Zoom call just to talk about things. How do you think about this? How do you think about this? A Zoom call lasted about an hour, and the relationship kind of grew from there. And then later he spun up Bankless, the newsletter, and that blew up and did really, really well. And at some point, I just DM'd Ryan, Ryan, Bankless needs a podcast. He needs a podcast too. Podcasts are hot. There's just this unfilled niche in the Ethereum ecosystem for a podcast that has this narrative base to it. Bankless is very narrative heavy. There's Into the Ether, which is a fantastic podcast, and they are explicit news and facts and data and analysis. And we have some of that at Bankless, but Bankless is more just a movement, a revolution, a social phenomenon, and that needs a podcast. And so at some point, I was just pestering Ryan, Ryan, you got to do a podcast. Ryan, you got to do a podcast, and finally convinced him. And then we started the podcast before we actually formalized any sort of relationship. Started the podcast together. But then after just maybe 1 or 2 months, it became very obvious that this podcast is here to stay. It works well with a newsletter. We also need to do the YouTube. There's also other things we can do. So we just formalized the relationship and made Bankless the company.
So speaking of Bankless, you've had, as I mentioned, some big names on the show. Where do you see that content going, that podcast content? Do you have a wish list of people you want to get on?
Oh yeah, we totally have a lit wish list. I really want to get on Andrew Yang. That's kind of my big goal for 2021. I want to get him on the Bankless pod. There are a few others as well. We tried to get Mark Cuban on recently, just kind of pestering him over Twitter, and a few other names that I can't remember off the top of my head. But we have high hopes for Bankless in 2021.
And have you gone Bankless yet?
Ironically, Bankless has a bank account, of course. But it depends on how you define Bankless. So I hold the vast majority of all of my wealth inside of Ethereum, 97%, right? I keep enough cash in the bank account to pay off my credit cards and just, a little bit of emergency funds. But other than that, it's in Ethereum. So yeah, I'm pretty damn Bankless.
Nice. For those who have only heard of decentralized finance and want to dip their toes in, honestly, I really appreciate your answers so far, because I think they're really great for new audiences. And that's part of who we want to listen to Show Me the Crypto. So for new audiences, where should they get started in DeFi? What are some of the fundamentals they need to understand?
Yeah, DeFi is a system of interacting contracts on Ethereum. So on Ethereum, you have your public address, your private key that gives you access to your funds. And then the other side, and that's one of two types of addresses on Ethereum. There's the public address where you hold your money, and then there are contract addresses. And that's like a little chunk of software, a little chunk of code. And these codes do stuff. And they interact, and you give them permission to interact with your monies in ways that you approve. And I think one of the most basic contracts on Ethereum is Uniswap. You would also call this a money Lego. You would also call this an Ethereum application. You would also call this a dApp. There's a bunch of different names for this. But Uniswap is like one of the very basic like money Lego building blocks for Ethereum. And what Uniswap does is that it allows you to swap one token for another, or Ether for token, Ether for USDC, USDC for MKR, MKR for YFI, like whatever. And the way that it does that is there's two participants. There's people that want to swap tokens one for another. And then there's people who provide the tokens for people to swap to. And so one person who is interested in swapping, USDC for Ether will go to the Uniswap USDC Ether pool, which many people have supplied equal dollar amounts of USDC and Ether, right? So like the pool size for the USDC Ether pool inside of Uniswap is like $10 million. There's $5 million worth of Ether on one side. There's $5 million worth of USDC on the other side. If you're swapping USDC for Ether, you put USDC in the USDC pool, and you are allowed to withdraw any equal amounts of Ether on the other side. And that's like a swap. And doing that, you actually offset the balance of these things. And that's how the price changes, right? If there's all of a sudden $15 more worth of USDC in the USDC pool, and then there's $15 less worth of Ether in the Ether pool, the supply of USDC went up, the supply of Ether went down, the price adjusts. That's how you adjust the price. And that's a very simple mechanism for swapping currencies. And the point about this whole thing is that this is completely automated. It's like one transaction, everything happens at once. You send your Ether or your money into the Uniswap code, it does all these changes, and then it outputs you a new token, and that's a swap. And that's just like the most basic building block for all of DeFi, right? Like almost all of DeFi kind of rests on top of Uniswap because it's such a universal swapper of tokens. Then we can get to even more complicated things like, borrowing and lending from Aave, pulling out a loan out of MakerDAO, their synthetics, and all of these building blocks get more and more complex and complicated and interesting, right? And the point about all these things are they're all in the same ecosystem. Ethereum is not a walled garden, it's open. So if you deploy a contract on Ethereum, if you deploy an app to Ethereum like Uniswap, all other applications can also use that, as well as all humans. Like this thing is permissionless. And so after Uniswap has been deployed, it's been leveraged by almost every other DeFi app out there, right? If any DeFi app needs to swap tokens, it just plugs into Uniswap, right? So DeFi is just this one massive system of plugins. And this is what we call money Legos. We have all of these individual Legos, and each one is an individual primitive, and you can start to combine them as one does with Legos into whatever you see fit, right? If you just combine them randomly, you're going to get a mess of a Lego block. But if you put thought into it, you can turn Legos into like a spaceship or some functional thing. And that's what we see going on in Ethereum. There's these functional structures being built out of all of these individual components, and that is what we call DeFi. Like this, the gargantuan, this Lego block structure that is all coming together. It's all coming together into one basic structure. That is what we call DeFi.
You mentioned there a little earlier in the conversation that 97% or something along those lines of your wealth is in Ethereum. So would you consider yourself an Ethereum maximalist? And I'm interested in your take on people who say there's going to be potentially Ethereum killers, or do you see that ever happening? Some of these other protocols disrupting the market share of Ethereum?
Yeah, defining maximalist is important here. We typically, if you just say maximalist, it's typically reserved for Bitcoin maximalists. And Bitcoin maximalists are like, there's only going to be one blockchain. It's Bitcoin. The game is over. It's all Bitcoin. That to me is Bitcoin maximalism. I guess I have similar similar attitudes about Ethereum, the blockchain, not ETH, the asset. So if I were to be a maximalist, I would be an Ethereum, the blockchain maximalist, rather than ETH, the asset maximalist, where Bitcoin maximalists are more, they actually don't like the Bitcoin blockchain. They only like BTC, the asset. And that's an important distinction. I'm going to go into a little tirade here.
Please do. Love it.
Yeah. So there's a confusion here with Ethereum and Ether. There's two things. There's Ethereum, the blockchain, and Ether, the asset. And that same relationship is also true for Bitcoin, the blockchain, and BTC, the asset. But with Bitcoin, they're the same name. It's Bitcoin and Bitcoins, right? They're the same name. In Ethereum, there's two different names. But with Bitcoin, Bitcoiners thoroughly enjoy BTC, the asset, and they see the Bitcoin blockchain as a means to the end for BTC, the asset. The goal is BTC, the asset, not Bitcoin, the blockchain. They don't like the Bitcoin blockchain. The blockchain itself is it's dead weight onto what is the real cool thing, which is BTC, the asset. Ethereum is a little bit the opposite, right? Ethereum uses Ether, the asset, to create Ethereum, the blockchain. And Ethereum, like I said, is this agnostic property rights management system, this agnostic ledger where anybody can do anything. And that's kind of why I wouldn't call myself an Ethereum maximalist, but I also wouldn't say no to that label either. There are certain just network effects that is associated with Ethereum because it can be anything for anyone. It is a Turing complete platform. It can do anything so long as you can code it up. And at some point, those network effects behind Ethereum are pretty inarguable. And Ethereum has a number of different tailwinds behind it. In addition to the fact that like almost all developer activity is on Ethereum, and the openness of DeFi allows anyone to just build something, and the structure that's being built is already so gargantuanly large in comparison to what's going on other smart contract platforms. Ethereum has a number of other advantages. It's specifically with this credible neutrality, right? The Ethereum ICO raise, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it was something like $15 million, relatively low number for blockchain raises. And it did it in this very fair method. It wasn't venture capital funded. No one front ran the Ethereum ICO. The Ethereum ICO was basically done by only retail believers, right? There was no institutions getting into the Ethereum ICO, because it was one of the first. It wasn't the first ICO, but it was very early, and it was the first ICO before ICO kind of got tainted, before it kind of left a bad taste in people's mouth, because people realized the power of this thing. So we kind of call it the immaculate ICO. Like, it only kind of works once. But this credible neutrality of the fairness of the way that Ethereum was bootstrapped, and its values and principles that it has, kind of like I was saying earlier, these things are political revolutions, and there are values baked into these chains. And Ethereum's values are like complete decentralization, credible neutrality with the ownership of the asset, distribution of ownership of the asset, and just trying to be a very inclusive place. And I think the values behind the Ethereum blockchain is also reflected in the Ethereum community. And at some point, we just have to admit that this thing has hit its liftoff. It's already gone. Like, it's already going to in the trajectory that is going to take it, in my opinion, into success. ETH killers, they try and sell something that isn't actually the hard problem about blockchain innovation. ETH killers try to say, like, we move super fast. Our blockchain has super high throughput. It's technologically advantaged, but this is a monetary revolution. This is less a technological revolution. Now, there's still important technological components that we can innovate and design on. And that's why we're doing Ethereum 2.0. That's why we have some of the world's best cryptographers experimenting and researching cryptography to improve Ethereum. Yet, if you don't have the money aspect that Ether does, and you don't have the credible neutrality of the blockchain, and how the blockchain was created, because Ethereum has made a lot of people very wealthy. If it made VCs wealthy, that wouldn't be as credibly neutral as if it made the individuals wealthy. And any Ethereum killer is VC funded, like almost all of them are. So it loses that credible neutrality. And they try and sell a product that, the scalability, it's useful. We all want scalability, but that's not the hard problem. The hard problem is the money revolution, and you don't get money without bottom-up trust in the platform. And so there isn't trust in these things like EOS or Definity or Polkadot. These things are less money. They are more tech. And that's only one half of the revolution. You need both money and tech to have a strong system. And that's to me what Ethereum is. And I don't think I can't find any other platform that has both money and tech.
And what do you think about when we reach a point in time, perhaps, when these different blockchain technologies are all interoperable with Ethereum? Does that add value? Is that something that isn't, in your eyes, necessary because Ethereum can do it all? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, so it is possible for many of these new blockchains to have some sort of bridge between Ethereum. We know that there are some projects that are tackling this problem head on. The question is, the question is, and you brought this up, do you actually need a whole entire separate blockchain, or can you do something on Ethereum as an L2 that does what that separate blockchain would have done? And the answer is you can do anything you want to do on an Ethereum L2. And if you just bake it in natively to Ethereum, you have stronger assurances. If you build something that can communicate with Ethereum better than a completely separate blockchain, like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they speak separate languages. Like Ethereum has the Ethereum virtual machine. It uses Solidity. Bitcoin is a scripting language. These things can't communicate very well. It's like speaking like French and Chinese. Like it's not going to happen. Ethereum killers or Ethereum, alternatives or, other blockchains like Cosmos, they have like these bridging mechanisms that's like the Google Translator. But also you could just build it straight onto Ethereum, and it's more efficient if you just use Ethereum and Solidity, right? It's just more efficient that way. It's easier to build bridges. It's less complicated. Things can develop and iterate faster. And so if you can do everything you can do on an Ethereum killer on an Ethereum L2, it just seems to make more sense to do it on an L2. And so that's kind of where like I'll accept the label of Ethereum maximalist, because like it can be done on Ethereum. And I think that it's better if you just do it on Ethereum. So just do it on Ethereum. Like that's where everyone else is doing it anyways. And you have stronger security assumptions if you just bake it into the Ethereum protocol itself.
And what about, and perhaps this isn't a challenge, knowing the future of ETH and ETH2 and where things are going. But in regards to gas fees, I have to bring that up because when we talk about money, you talk about how this is a monetary challenge that we're facing. Mm-hmm. There's places in the world where those who are adopting Ethereum as money, they may not have a lot. And so to get into Ethereum, holding $10 to them in USD value may actually be quite a lot of money, and that may be all they're able to afford on a month's earnings. And so when to make a transaction, if their gas fee is like $10 as well, I mean, that's a huge barrier, or could be. So I don't know, maybe what are your thoughts around that? Is that even a problem, knowing it's something being worked on right now?
It's a huge problem, and yes, it is being worked on. And this is why Ethereum has always committed to scale. So now when we talk about like this whole revolution of cryptocurrencies, it's both a tech revolution and a money revolution. Now we're talking about the tech side. This is why we have to improve the tech side. Ethereum killers improve the tech side in interesting ways, but I don't think they do it in the right way. They work on it through like by like kind of centralizing nodes, so there's less nodes running the system, and we can talk about all the intricacies behind that. But basically, that if less computers run the distributed network, that distributed network can go faster, right? It's easier if there's just like 100 nodes rather than 10,000 nodes. It's easier to propagate all the information. That sacrifices decentralization, which is one of Ethereum's core principles that it does not sacrifice. So Ethereum said, we are going to figure out how to scale, but we're not going to sacrifice decentralization. We're not going to sacrifice being like a public ledger that can be verified and downloadable by all. So what Ethereum did is they took the hard way. Like they didn't cut corners. And instead of scaling via kind of like tricks of networking and CPU usage, they are scaling via cryptographic new cryptographic mechanisms, where cryptography can take a big piece of data and then they can turn it into a proof, which is a little piece of data that proves that the big piece of data exists. And then they only include the little piece of data into the blockchain. So the blockchain actually becomes more efficient. The metaphor I like to use is if you go back and get one of the early Xbox 360 games, like the graphics are kind of shitty. Later Xbox 360 games, graphics are incredible. The hardware didn't change. like developers just learned how to make more with less. They optimized, they consolidated, they compressed. And that's how we think Ethereum is going to scale using cryptography. That's one of the big improvements from Ethereum 1 to Ethereum 2.0 is using BLS signatures, which is a cryptographic term. We're moving away from one type of cryptography into a more advanced, more developed, more research type of cryptography that allows for much more compression. That's one way to scale, very important way to scale. Then there's also sharding, which just shards out the Ethereum blockchain from one blockchain to 64 blockchains. And the nodes of Ethereum, the many, many nodes of Ethereum that we didn't sacrifice because when we didn't sacrifice decentralization, starts to only verify 1/64 of the blockchain, right? And then all of these things come together. So then we get 64 times the amount of scale that way. And these things start to compound as well. So we had the compression and then we had 64 times more blockchains. That's a multiplier. So if we can compress things like 10x and then we add 64x more block space in the shards, so we're already at 640 times scale. And we haven't even talked about L2, which there are many different types of L2s. The word that people will hear will probably be rollups, where the way that rollups work is that a contract on Ethereum makes a transaction that states the rules of how it will verify transactions off-chain. And so it loads up a rule-based system and says to Ethereum, I'm going to process transactions according to these rules. And then it goes and does that on its own like centralized server. And so it gets the scale of a centralized server, but the assurances of the Ethereum blockchain, right? And so this is how we can like run a high bandwidth, high throughput game where people are trading like tokens back and forth instantaneously, like the snap of the fingers. And then it just loads up that state and compresses it using cryptography, and then it puts it back onto Ethereum once every 10 minutes, once every 30 minutes. So it only puts a little bit of information into Ethereum at a very longer time. And this is another way to scale. This is like getting the UI and the UX of doing transactions in like your World of Warcraft game where you were buying and selling with a vendor. That it should mimic that sort of style. And so that also takes it zero gas. And then there's a bunch of other opportunities to scale as well. And all of these things compound. And so scaling is in the future of the Ethereum blockchain. And so I do not believe that people should be spending $10 to swap tokens. That's ridiculous. People should be spending less than 10 cents to do that. However, I do want to make the case that high gas fees are a good thing. They suck for people, and maybe it's like a privilege to be able to say that, like high gas fees, we actually want this. However, it's important that to think on the monetary side of things, all transactions on Ethereum have some sort of value with them. Like probably within the last minute, somebody just sent $1 million worth of ETH from one address to another. That took up block space. And if so many people are transferring large value transactions that have just a lot of economic value to them, that's going to fill up the block space, and that's going to push out people that are making transactions with just a little bit of value. People are going to be less incentivized to spend $3 to send $10 than spending $3 to send $10 million. And so this is kind of the critique of public blockchains, is that they kind of turn into quote unquote whale chains. Like you can only operate them if you have a lot of money. And that's why Ethereum has committed to scale, because scaling is inclusivity. Scaling means that more people can engage with the blockchain, but high value transactions are always going to push out low value transactions. And that adds to the security of the blockchain, right? So if Ethereum is processing many, many high value transactions, miners are getting paid extra for securing the blockchain. And in the future, stakers who are when we transition from Ethereum to proof of stake, stakers get that extra reward. So as the Ethereum blockchain becomes a more valuable place to transfer value, those high value transactions compensate the people providing security to Ethereum. And so that's where the money component gets involved here. You need to have your base money be extremely valuable, because that's how we compensate miners or validators for their security. So the more economic activity on Ethereum, the more necessary it is to have a high security blockchain, and high gas fees are the way that we compensate proportionally to security. So it would be bad. It would be bad if there were no fees. We need fees to keep these systems alive. We also need to find ways to have optionality for people that can't pay those fees to pay them in different ways, or to make their transactions happen in different ways that doesn't cost them an arm and a leg.
David, I love the way you're explaining it. I'm learning a lot on this episode already, which is awesome. But so I have to ask you, because I follow the space and whatnot, but I haven't fully wrapped my head around maybe the potential of NFTs, non-fungible tokens. And do you mind, for the benefit again of our audience, just kind of a brief explanation of what those are, the difference between fungible, non-fungible, but also like where you see the potential being in that space?
Sure. So the easiest way to explain fungible tokens, and when we say tokens, everyone should also be thinking just assets. And that includes like Chuck E. Cheese tokens or like a quarter. A quarter is a token. A dollar is a token. Fungible tokens, say I have like, you have $1 and I have $1 and my dollar is pristine, but your dollar is wrinkled and ugly and it's got writing on it. Those are still dollars, and that's because they're fungible, right? I wouldn't actually care all that much if I had to give you my pristine dollar to receive your crappy dollar, because it's still a dollar. That's what fungibility is. Non-fungible tokens, as you would imagine, are assets that don't have any other asset like it, right? So a deed to a house is a good representation of a non-fungible token. It's extremely unique, right? We could even talk about something like Pokemon cards, like a first edition holographic Pikachu. That's a non-fungible token. It's not the same as other Pikachus out there, right? That's a unique asset. And maybe another metaphor is if you are playing World of Warcraft and you get a piece of loot, that piece of loot has a random number generator goes through it and puts out the stats for that piece of loot, right? So like a sword that does like 233 damage with like fire damage to it. That's unique. That's a unique sword. We can turn that into an NFT as well. The currency in that game, the gold that you use to purchase that sword, that's a fungible currency. The power of NFTs come from the fact that a single NFT token can represent any asset, any unique asset in the world, right? And both in the digital world, the Ethereum native world, where people are minting digital assets. There's a game called Gods Unchained, which I like. It's very much like a Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering type game. And the benefit. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go into this one. Okay. So we have Magic the Gathering. It's physical cards and you own them because you have them in your physical possession. And then you go and you play across the table with a real person. That's awesome because you own the cards. You can sell, it's a bearer asset in the same way like gold is a bearer asset. If it's in your hand, you own it. Magic the Gathering cards are also bearer assets. And so you can trade them with real people. But you also lose the benefit of a game like Hearthstone, which you can play on a computer, right? And there are certain mechanics that Hearthstone, the game, can do because it's a computer game and it's not, and there's like certain like random number generators or just randomness specifically is a really good example for something you can do in the Hearthstone game, which is very similar to the Magic the Gathering game, but you can't do it in Magic the Gathering because it's in the real world. Like there's this adding the computer element is really important. But the difference with Hearthstone is that when you purchase cards on Hearthstone, you're purchasing them through Blizzard. You don't actually own them. So like Blizzard could quote unquote deplatform you, right? They've cut off people's accounts after they have spent like tens of thousands of dollars on cards, and then they violated the terms of service, and then Blizzard's just axed their account. They don't have their cards. They don't own them. They also can't trade them with other people. They can't sell their account. That's a violation of the terms of service. So you don't actually own the card. So you're buying the card packs from Blizzard, but you're giving them money, and then they're just like giving you the credit of the card. And so this is where something like Gods Unchained is spanning the best of both worlds for Magic the Gathering and Blizzard. So with Gods Unchained, the cards that you open up and win in the game turn into tokens on Ethereum that go to your Ethereum wallet. And those are NFT tokens, right? You open up a pack, you get 5 NFT tokens, and the Gods Unchained video game displays those tokens as cards in your deck. And so you can't get deplatformed from Gods Unchained. And you can have this open secondary market where you can trade these things on the internet. And so it's the best of both worlds. The NFT tokens from Gods Unchained are like the real bearer assets of Magic the Gathering, but also have the power of digital computing and the internet behind it. And so was one of the greatest examples for NFT that I think I can think of.
Yeah. No, I love that description. Before we get into kind of the last segment of our interview, I want to ask you, because the thing that I find really cool is you come into the space in 2017. Like you said, the hype, everyone's talking about it, the price is rising. That's what gets the excitement. If you kind of believe the theory of, we're in the brink of stepping into another bull run here, there might be a lot of people coming into the space around now with with similar kind of mentality. But the difference between you and most people in 2017 is that you're still here. You stuck around the space, you stuck through the bear market. What's your advice to people who are getting brought in because of the euphoria around price and that kind of thing? Just maybe like a word of warning for them or something along the lines of as they navigate this new idea.
Yeah. So when I got into the space in 2017, I felt very, very late. I felt like, I only had like one ether to my name. And, as a broke college student, like that was a lot. And I just felt late, like this revolution has already happened. Like, I'm late to the show. And maybe I was late for 2017. I definitely did not come out of 2017 positive on my investments. But what I learned in the bear market is I'm so goddamn early to this whole entire revolution. And the bull market messes with people's minds. Like it's a very euphoric time. People have trouble like understanding and measuring their emotions. And, while that's typically related to people's bags and their investments, they get emotional about their investments. It also gets emotional about the industry because the industry is in just getting completely shifted. So let it be known, if anyone listener here thinks that they are late, like maybe you're late for this bull market, even though I don't think you actually are, but to this industry, you are still so incredibly early. And I think it just takes time for that to come true. You are going to run into this industry and you're going to be learning everything and everything will be confusing and you don't know where to go. And then at some point you kind of learn it all. You kind of just go down every single rabbit hole. And then you realize that there's actually so much missing space that needs to be filled in this industry. And so for people that are interested in figuring out how to break into this industry, the answer for me, like I felt like there's nothing I can really contribute. I'm not a developer. I don't know how to code. I'm not a fund. I can't like create a fund. That's not me. But so how do I even like get started if I want to break into this industry? I just started writing. I just started doing work. And at some point I realized that people liked what I wrote and that turned into more writing, which turned into more writing, which turned into a podcast, which turned into Bankless. There's such a insatiable demand for content of all types in this industry that it's actually relatively easy to get listeners to listen to you because people want to consume content. And that was what my specialty was. Your specialty can be something completely different, but to think that like this industry doesn't have a place for you is naive. Like this is such an unsaturated industry where like some random like 26-year-old can come in and start working within like 6 months. Like that is an option for everyone who is listening to this. All you have to do is find what's interesting and figure out and what interests you and figure out how to just contribute. And especially with Ethereum, there are so many of these DeFi protocols that have treasuries that need labor, right? You need to do social media or marketing or just community management. Like there are plenty of jobs if you go look for them. You just have to start contributing free value first. People aren't going to trust you until you start doing things for free. And then you'll get compensation after the fact.
Can I ask, running Bankless, you're full-time in crypto, that's an entrepreneurial thing. You could, going off of what you were just mentioning, getting into crypto, I mean, people may think eventually, well, I should get a job in crypto, and they could go look for employment with a crypto company, a blockchain company. But for you, you're now just solely doing Bankless, and I'm sure you've got your other investments. Does Bankless itself support you from a day-to-day standpoint?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the Bankless is an advertiser model. So we have the podcast, and then there are 4 advertisers in one podcast episode, 2 at the front, 2 in the mid-roll. And then the newsletter also takes advertisers. And then what else are those are kind of like the big ways that we make money, and then also the subscribers revenue for the podcast as well. So, or for this newsletter. So people pay $12 a month to get the premium version of the newsletter. So that compensates my salary, Ryan's salary, and then also Lucas's salary, who's kind of turning into our senior editor.
Awesome. Super impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love it. David, we like to end every episode of Show Me the Crypto with a 3-question segment called You Had Me at Crypto.
All right, David. Who is your favorite person to follow in the crypto space?
Favorites. Can I get a few more descriptors around the word favorite? Because I could take favorite in so many different directions.
Interpret it however you want, I'd say.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I got to go with Anthony Cesano. He's great on Twitter. He's also really informative, and he's very sober in his takes. And so while DeFi mania is going crazy, like I kind of use Anthony to kind of gauge sentiment because I don't think he succumbs to some of the craziness as most people do. He's also just a huge believer in Ethereum. He just he worked at Set Protocol, and now he's an advisor at Set Protocol. Now he does these daily YouTube videos and daily newsletters releases called the Daily Gwei. And he just lives and breathes Ethereum. Like Ethereum is spoken out of his mouth. He does a really good job conveying the values and the principles of this space. And so for people that are trying to learn more about Ethereum, I would definitely recommend Anthony Cesano. That is Sassal, SASSAL_0x.
There are,
I think.
He's become a meme at this point.
Yes, he has become a meme. Yeah, for unrelated reasons.
Yeah.
Yes, Sassal 0x with no underscore. Pardon me.
What will the price of Bitcoin be 10 years from now?
10 years from now. Yeah. That's so long away. I can say any number right now.
Yes, you can.
No one will hold me accountable. Exactly. So that's a really hard question to ask because where you're asking what's the price of Bitcoin in relationship to dollars. So baked in that question is what is a dollar worth? It's a dollar worth. And I don't know what the dollar is going to be worth 10 years from now. And we, out of the Bankless newsletter, we recently put out a piece in 2021 predictions where we predicted that the Coinbase IPO was going to IPO at above $100 billion. Speculation and initially was at 50 billion, and both Ryan and I thought that was way too low. And we think they're going to IPO at the end of 2021. And part of the question of like how much is Coinbase going to be worth when they IPO towards the end of 2021 is even at the end of 2021, I don't know what the dollar's worth. Like we're printing a bunch of dollars, like 26% of the supply of US dollars came in the last 12 months. I don't know what the dollar is going to be worth like in the end of this year. I definitely don't know what it's going to be worth in the end of 10 years. However, if you wanted to pin me down, I'll say $10 million. There you go. $10 million for one Bitcoin.
That's the highest. We're a few episodes in here, and so many people say 1 million. That's just like the go-to answer. So I like your.
Okay, here's another tirade. This industry moves in exponentials. It doesn't move in linear fashion, and people's brains, human brains, can't really comprehend that very well. People's brains like linear things, 7% in the SPY per year. Like that's not crypto. Crypto is like, 2 to 3 years of flat. And then there's 1 year of like 10,000%. Right. Like you got to think in order to survive in this industry, you have to think in exponentials.
All right. What is the most underrated coin or project in crypto?
I really like Rocket Pool. And so if in order to become part of Ethereum staking, you need 32 Ether, right? You have to stake 32 Ether to become part of the proof of stake. That's how you get ETH dividends on your Ether, ETH yield. 32 Ether is like $40,000 right now. That's a large amount of money. Not everyone has $40,000 or 32 Ether. So if you still want to participate in Ethereum staking and part of the decentralization of the protocol, Rocket Pool is a staking pool, right? So if you only have 8 Ether or just any number of Ether, you can go to Rocket Pool and pool your Ether with other people that also don't have 32 Ether. And then your combined 32 Ether can be used to stake. And so I think that's a pretty underappreciated project. It's something that is very close to the heart of Ethereum. It's part of Ethereum's core values of accessibility to the base protocol and decentralization. So it's tackling really important problems all at once.
We usually only ask 3 questions, but I'm going to add in a 4th for you based on your interest in Ethereum. And I know the whole dollar argument, but same question with the Bitcoin. 10 years, what's the price of an Ether, in your opinion?
Price of an Ether in 10 years. It's got to be upwards of $500,000.
Love it.
Yeah.
David, this has been a pleasure. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. So thanks so much for joining us on Show Me the Crypto.
Thank you very much.
Hey, this was a ton of fun, guys. Happy to be here.
Thank you for listening to Show Me the Crypto. Please make sure to subscribe as well as rate and review this podcast.